My name is Timothy Nguyen, and I'm a family and consumer science major, and I'm Asian. Now, for the vast majority of people, it seems rather self-explanatory. Maybe I would be someone really good at math, who likes computers, or eats rice with every meal, or is a mediocre driver at best. I mean, someone might even presume that I'm Chinese, Japanese, or Korean, which makes up the holy trinity of what the relative population guesses what people from Asia are. But people have to realize that everyone's different. There are different Asian races within that subgroup. And needless to say, even I was also under the impression that each of these three act near identical. It's just human nature. However, I have learned through this experience of interviewing my friend that we might all look very similar, but Asians are culturally diverse as there are different flavors of ice cream. For one, I am Vietnamese, and no, I don't eat pho for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but I am one of the Asian subsections that get little to no limelight. I recently had the privilege to interview one of my close friends who is another Asian subsection against little to no recognition, Filipinos. Previously, in our interactions, I saw little to no difference. We were both second-generation Asian Americans, and both of our parents came over from Asia, whether it be by plane or boat, after ability of discourse within our countries. Since we both were born and raised in America, I previously assumed we have near identical practices within the home, with only a small bit of cultural influence. However, after this interview, I realized how wrong that assumption was. I noticed three distinct categories, which were completely different between our cultures. And those are our view of positive personality traits, our values regarding family, and spiritual ideology ingrained within our culture. For starters, positive personality traits differ between our races. Filipinos generally believe outgoing nature is really important, and the ability to perform, such as acting, singing, and dancing. It's one of the most important aspects that a Filipino person could have. However, in Vietnamese culture, manners, abiding by the hierarchy of the family is generally what is most focused on in terms of individual aspects. These two can roughly be traced back to tribal Filipino heritage, where performing was a large aspect of tradition, and Vietnamese communism, which focuses on a code of mannerisms and hierarchy, is a pretty big reason why we act the way we are. The next thing is the importance and value that's related to family. In Filipino culture, family ties are one of the most important ties that exist in a person's life. Physical affection as well as emotional affection are often in practice with this culture. However, in mine, Vietnamese culture, those forms of public displays of affection are normally frowned upon. These can surprisingly be also tied into the spiritual differences between our culture. Filipino culture has deep connections with Catholicism, which involves showing love and compassion as they believe Jesus has shown them. However, in Vietnamese culture, Buddhism is the main cultural influence, and that usually prioritizes solitude and humility. Looking at the two, with one being more outgoing, affectionate, and Catholicism-centered, with the other being more hierarchy-centered, manner-oriented, and Buddhist-influenced, I was appalled at the differences, but can also see why they make us diverse, even though we both define ourselves as Asian. Initially, I used to think many Asian cultures had numerous similarities that caused our cultures to blend in with each other, and eventually became lost within stereotypes and prejudice. However, as this experience, I have realized that there are many aspects of culture that I had no idea existed before. I am pretty determined now to learn not only more about Asian cultures for cultures all around the world, but Asian cultures that are within my community as well. I eventually hope to gain more cultural competency in these areas to further improve my communication and awareness when talking to different individuals. I was also under this false pretense that before I was an expert in Asian cultures because, I'm Asian. However, now I know there is so much more than meets the eye and can only be opened through conversation, communication, and understanding that people can be different, and there's nothing wrong with that. Thanks.